What the hell is that supposed to be? Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane's voice cut through the humid North Carolina air like a blade. The 31-year-old Delta Force operator wasn't looking at the advanced weapons systems scattered across Fort Bragg's most classified training compound. His cold gray eyes were fixed on the faded plastic badge clipped to the belt of the old man, slowly inspecting their secure perimeter. The badge looked like a relic, scratched, yellowed, and showing decades of wear that made Kane immediately suspicious. Harold Hank Morrison, 79 years old, continued his methodical security assessment without acknowledging the comment. His movements were deliberate and professional, the way a man works when he's been conducting classified facility inspections for decades. He wore his usual faded red work shirt that had survived more wash cycles than most soldiers had deployments, blue jeans that showed no particular distinction, and worn work boots that had walked through more classified facilities than most generals would ever see. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and his pale blue eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had spent a lifetime observing details that others missed entirely. Kane was 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, the absolute pinnacle of military excellence. His unit didn't officially exist. Their missions were classified beyond most generals' clearance levels, and their selection process was so demanding that Navy SEALs washed out regularly. The idea that some elderly civilian contractor with a beat-up CIA badge was walking freely through their most secure training area offended his professional paranoia. "Seriously, old man," Kane continued, his voice carrying casual authority, "where did you get that badge? Looks like something you picked up at a surplus store to impress people." Several other operators looked up from their equipment maintenance. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Sergeant First Class Chen, and Sergeant Williams all shared Kane's suspicious attitude toward unauthorized personnel in their sacred space. Morrison paused in his inspection, not turning around but allowing his shoulders to straighten slightly. When he spoke, his voice carried quiet authority that seemed oddly out of place. "This badge has been with me for 47 years, son. Central Intelligence Agency, Office of Technical Services. Currently valid through 2026. The response only encouraged Kane's skepticism. "Right, and I suppose you're going to tell us you're some kind of spy." Kane's laugh contained genuine mockery. "Look, Grandpa, this is a restricted Delta Force facility. You need proper authorization or I'm calling security." Morrison slowly turned around, and for the first time, Kane got a clear look at his face. The old man's eyes weren't confused or apologetic. They were the sharp, alert eyes of someone who had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Morrison reached into his shirt pocket and withdrew a leather credential folder, opening it to reveal not just the CIA badge, but identification with a series of codes that meant nothing to most people but carried significant weight in intelligence circles. Harold Morrison, Central Intelligence Agency, Office of Technical Services. Current clearance, TSSCI with Special Access Program authorization. Kane studied the credentials with growing confusion. They appeared authentic, but the idea seemed absurd. "Anyone can fake an ID, old man. What's your actual business here?" Kane's voice carried increasing hostility as his security instincts engaged. Morrison's expression didn't change, but something in his bearing suggested he was accustomed to this skepticism. "I'm conducting a routine security assessment of this facility's classified protocol. Your commanding officer requested CIA technical oversight of your operational security measures." Kane's suspicion intensified. "Bullshit. If CIA was here, we'd have been briefed. You're trespassing, and I'm about to make this very uncomfortable for you." Morrison remained calm, his voice carrying an undertone that made several operators pause. "Son, I've been conducting security assessments since before you were born. I know exactly what protocols should be followed." Morrison's mind suddenly drifted to another time, another place entirely. The North Carolina facility faded away, replaced by the sterile corridors of CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. He wasn't 79 anymore. He was 35, a senior technical officer with the Office of Technical Services, responsible for developing covert surveillance systems that would be deployed in the most sensitive operations worldwide. The year was 1985, and Morrison was part of a highly classified program developing technical capabilities for intelligence operations behind the Iron Curtain. In those classified laboratories, Morrison had worked on equipment that wouldn't be acknowledged for decades: miniaturized cameras, encrypted communication devices, and security systems designed to protect America's most sensitive secret. He remembered testing countermeasures against Soviet intelligence services, developing technical solutions for operations in Moscow and Prague, where discovery meant death for CIA officers operating under diplomatic cover. Morrison's innovations had saved lives and prevented intelligence disasters that could have altered the course of the Cold War. Back in the present, Morrison's eyes refocused on the young operators. "The thing about security assessments," Morrison said quietly, "is that they only work when the people being tested don't know they're being evaluated. Real vulnerabilities are exposed when elite operators assume they know who belongs and who doesn't." Kane felt his authority challenged by an elderly man with questionable credentials. "I don't care what you think you're authorized to do. Rodriguez, call base security." Rodriguez reached for his phone but hesitated, something about Morrison's confidence making him pause. "What if I verify his clearance first? Just proper procedure." Kane nodded curtly, thinking this would expose Morrison as a fraud. Rodriguez dialed security. "Base security, this is Rodriguez at Delta Compound. Need to verify clearance for Harold Morrison, CIA Office of Technical Services." Brief pause. When the response came, Rodriguez's face went pale. "Rodriguez, that individual has presidential-level clearance authorization. Do not detain, do not question, do not interfere. Is there a problem?" Rodriguez looked at Morrison with new understanding. "No problem, sir. Routine verification." He hung up, turning to Kane with mixed confusion and worry. "His clearance checks out. Presidential-level authorization." Kane felt his confidence waver. Presidential-level clearance was something he'd heard about but never encountered. Authorization from the highest government levels for operations transcending normal classification. Morrison continued his methodical inspection, examining sight lines and camera positions with practiced expertise that most people would never notice. "Your perimeter security has 3 significant weaknesses," Morrison said conversationally, as if discussing weather. "The north fence line has a blind spot where thermal imaging doesn't overlap. Your vehicle checkpoint can be bypassed through the maintenance area, and your communications array is vulnerable to electronic surveillance from the water tower." Several operators exchanged glances. Morrison was identifying security flaws they had never noticed despite extensive reconnaissance training. Kane felt increasingly uncomfortable as the old man demonstrated knowledge suggesting he was exactly who he claimed. "Even if you are CIA, what's your mission here?" Morrison smiled with the expression of someone accustomed to operational security questions. "Testing whether America's most elite soldiers can distinguish between actual threats and authorized personnel conducting legitimate oversight. So far, you're failing rather dramatically." Morrison reached into his jacket, withdrawing a small electronic device resembling a pager but clearly wasn't. "This has been recording your security responses and decision-making processes for 20 minutes. The data will be included in my assessment report." Kane started to object when they heard multiple vehicles approaching at high speed, heavy engines moving fast, coming up the access road. The distinctive whine of turbocharged diesels pushed to their limits, creating dust clouds visible from miles away. Staff Sergeant Chen made a critical decision. "What if I contact command just to get clarification on this situation?" Kane nodded, thinking higher authority would resolve this confusion. Chen walked toward communications, but decided to call Sergeant Major Williams at headquarters first. "Sergeant Major, this is Chen at the compound. We have an elderly civilian claiming CIA credentials conducting some kind of assessment. Says his name is Harold Morrison." Unusually long pause. When Sergeant Major Williams spoke again, his voice carried tension Chen had never heard. "Chen, did you say Harold Morrison, CIA?" Silence stretched for 5 seconds. "Sweet Mother of God," Williams said, papers rustling frantically. "Chen, listen carefully. Do not allow anyone to lay a hand on Harold Morrison. Do you understand? Not a finger on that man." Chen felt his stomach drop. In 6 years of knowing Williams, he'd never heard him sound panicked. Sergeant Major, what's happening? I need to make urgent calls immediately. That man is definitely not a confused civilian. Keep everything calm until I arrive personally. The line went dead. Chen returned to find the standoff unchanged, Kane still challenging Morrison, who maintained patient dignity despite increasingly hostile treatment. Morrison had quietly approached their tactical display board, studying operational plans with methodical attention. "Your breach sequence has a timing flaw," he observed. "The second team's entry window overlaps with the first team's egress route. Under stress, that's a blue-on-blue waiting to happen." The technical accuracy of his assessment made several operators pause their preparation. Before anyone could respond, the convoy sounds grew louder. Morrison remained exactly where he'd been throughout the confrontation, patient, professional, still conducting his assessment. Something subtle in his expression had changed slightly, the faintest suggestion of satisfaction, as if events were unfolding exactly as anticipated. The dust clouds were now visible through the windows, multiple vehicles approaching with the urgency of a national security response. The convoy screeched to a halt with the urgency of a crisis response. Heavy doors slammed simultaneously, military boots echoing across concrete. Kane stood frozen as senior personnel emerged with purpose and authority that made his stomach drop. Sergeant Major Williams stepped out quickly, followed by several senior officers Kane didn't recognize. But everyone's attention focused on the second vehicle, where a two-star general was climbing out with an expression mixing profound respect with barely controlled urgency. Major General Patricia Hayes commanded Joint Special Operations Command, overseeing all Tier 1 units including Delta Force. Her unexpected personal arrival was unprecedented, causing every operator to snap to rigid attention. General Hayes walked directly toward Morrison, ignoring Kane and the others completely. When she reached Morrison's position, something remarkable happened. The general came to rigid attention and rendered the sharpest, most precise salute anyone present had ever witnessed. "Mr. Harold Morrison, Central Intelligence Agency, retired," General Hayes said, her voice booming across the suddenly silent compound. "Sir, on behalf of the United States military, I apologize for the inexcusable treatment you have received here today." Morrison slowly returned the salute, movement still precise despite his age. "General, no apology necessary. These operators were protecting their facility exactly as trained. The assessment is proceeding as planned." The general held her salute 5 full seconds before dropping her hand with military precision. Kane felt his knees weaken as reality crashed over him. He had been challenging someone whose clearance exceeded his commanding general's. General Hayes turned to address the stunned operators. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce Harold Gray Ghost Morrison, former Deputy Director of the CIA's Office of Technical Services. Mr. Morrison has conducted covert security assessments for over 40 years. Testing security protocols at America's most sensitive installation." The operators stood frozen as implications sank in. They had been dismissing someone whose authority exceeded anything they'd encountered. General Hayes continued, her voice hardening as she looked directly at Kane. "Mr. Morrison's assessments have identified vulnerabilities that prevented intelligence disasters at facilities worldwide. His work has saved American lives and protected operations you'll never be cleared to know about." Morrison shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncomfortable with public recognition. "General, these operators demonstrated exactly the security consciousness that makes them effective. My assessment will reflect their commitment to protecting classified operations, even if execution needs refinement." He held up the recording device. "This facility passed the basic security test. Your people are appropriately paranoid and protective." General Hayes nodded with obvious relief. "What recommendations will you make?" Morrison looked around with practiced assessment eyes. "Your operators have excellent instincts and proper security awareness. They correctly identified an unknown individual and took protective measures. The only improvement needed is better coordination with higher headquarters to ensure authorized oversight personnel are properly briefed to local teams." Morrison reached into his briefcase, withdrawing official CIA credentials and authorization documents. "Master Sergeant Kane, your security response was textbook perfect for unauthorized intrusion. The problem wasn't your execution. It was chain of command failure to coordinate this assessment. Kane felt relief mixed with embarrassment, realizing his actions had been professionally appropriate despite the misunderstanding. "Sir," Kane said, his voice barely above a whisper as full implications became clear, "I apologize for questioning your authority and credentials. I should have verified through proper channels before challenging your presence." Morrison gave him a genuine smile, holding no trace of anger. "Son, you did exactly what a good operator should do. You protected your facility, challenged unauthorized personnel, and followed security protocols. That's precisely why this facility received a passing grade." General Hayes reached into her briefcase, withdrawing a commendation certificate. "Mr. Morrison, on behalf of Joint Special Operations Command, I want to present this recognition for your decades of service protecting America's most sensitive military operation. Your work has made every special operations mission safer and more secure." Morrison accepted the certificate with humble dignity that had characterized his entire intelligence career. Morrison slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing a small, faded tattoo of the CIA's eagle and shield emblem, barely visible due to age and sun damage. General Hayes smiled knowingly and gestured toward her own sleeve, where a similar but newer version was visible. "This symbol, operators," the general said, displaying both tattoos, "represents partnership between military special operations and intelligence services that has protected American interests worldwide for decades. Mr. Morrison earned his during operations, still classified above your clearance level." Kane stepped forward, his voice carrying newfound respect. "Mr. Morrison, I was completely out of line challenging your presence. I apologize for my disrespect and failure to recognize your authority and service." Morrison gave him a tired but genuine smile. "Son, you were doing your job exactly as trained. The system failed you by not coordinating this assessment properly. Your security response will be highlighted as exemplary in my final report." General Hayes reached into another folder, withdrawing a current top-secret SCI badge with red border indicating Special Access Program clearance. "Mr. Morrison, this is your reactivated clearance badge. The agency has been trying to bring you back as senior consultant for years. Your expertise in technical security assessment is unmatched." Morrison looked at the badge with emotions playing across weathered features. "I never expected to see active clearance again, General. I figured my time was past." General Hayes carefully pinned the new badge to Morrison's faded red